What's happening, everyone? Pragmatic Addict here. I'm back with Jacob. So we just finished watching Beavis and Butthead episode 9. Can you guys believe that we are 9 episodes in? It still hasn't gotten renewed for a 3rd season yet, which I'm praying to God it does happen, because this episode, man, it's one of those seasons where as the episodes go on, I do feel like it was just off to a rocky start and that they were saving the best for last, because this episode and the last episode specifically, yeah, they might be some of my favorite episodes so far this season. So these two episodes are called Stolen Valor and Breeding Frenzy, which I'm just gonna say, hearing those titles, I had to look up the premises, which this is very interesting because as someone who's not a big fan typically of old Beavis and Butthead, this episode's premise, being Stolen Valor, had me, I guess, a little bit, like, it felt right. It made more sense. But with the second episode's premise, I just had to see it for that what the fuck reason. Which basically, the first episode, Stolen Valor, its premise is that Beavis and Butthead pose as veterans so they can get free beer. With the second episode, Breeding Frenzy, just hear me out, guys. This is the literal fucking premise. God, I don't even know what the fucking premise says. I was so engulfed in what the fuck was going down in this second episode that I'm just gonna say the premise in my own words. Basically, Beavis and Butthead find out that there's this breed of dog that is actually worth $5,000. So, in their thoughts, okay, we have to make a dog breed with another dog, and then we'll be rich. They can't find a dog, so they get a raccoon. I'm just gonna leave it there. We'll talk about that episode in a little bit. But for right now, let's talk about Stolen Valor. So, right off the bat, I felt a wave of nostalgia, which maybe this is just because of the Easter eggs that were going on in the background. We see old Butthead riding in a motorized cart where obviously Beavis has to fucking be on foot, and the whole time he's just complaining that he wants a turn and that taking turns sucks. And as they're rolling down this sidewalk, you can see them passing landmarks like Burger World and shit, where what basically ends up happening is that they roll up to, it's a bar, right? Is it a bar?
I think it's a VFW.
A VFW, where they actually see Anderson and a bunch of other veterans loading in a shitload of beer. When it comes to this kind of stuff, I am very foreign to it, so it was Flag Day. But they're loading in all this beer, and basically they walk in expecting to get some, obviously they're of age and whatnot, where Anderson stops them at the entrance and says that this is only for veterans, which they find out the beer is completely free because it is, like Jacob said, Flag Day. So this basically goes down with Anderson asking them, well, do you guys have any experience serving? Which Beavis just takes it, oh yeah, food service. Yeah, we worked at Burger World for a while. So he's being very vague with this, saying, oh yeah, we had to wear a uniform. And because Anderson is like, well, did you guys wear a hat? And he's like, oh yeah, we had to wear a hat every day. So Anderson mistakes them for being actual veterans. And when they walk in and they actually get settled and are drinking amongst the other veterans, it goes down that route that I could only expect, where obviously with this premise and with it being Beavis and Butthead, they get mistaken for what one of the veterans says, quote, the real deal. They're talking about the 69, which someone mistakes it as the 69th. So everyone's like, wow, these guys are the real deal. So they end up getting rewarded with flags, in which is ultimately supposed to result in them raising the flags and saying a speech. Well, here's what ends up happening. All the other vets are outside getting everything ready. Beavis and Butthead are the only ones inside the bar just getting absolutely smashed and end up losing their flags. In which, eventually, Beavis gets reminded, he's like, wait, weren't we supposed to be doing something? And Butthead's like, oh yeah, I think we were supposed to raise our flag. Where is it? They lost them. So what do they fucking do? They rip a Vietnam flag off of the wall. And it was just one of those things where, with classic endings of Beavis and Butthead episodes, I'm like, okay, the anxiety is here. The morbid humor is here. There's no way that this is not going to go out with a fucking bang.
Also, I'm just going to say it. With all they did in this episode, they got off pretty easy.
Yeah, for what could have happened, for what should have happened, how it wrapped up, I was like, okay, fair enough, which I do want to talk about the ending because I'm not going to spoil too much, but how it does end is something that, like Jacob was saying, it could have gone a little bit, like, further, but for, I guess, the gag, the running, like, the inside joke in this episode, which is addressed earlier on, where Butthead's like, so basically, we're American, so I guess we can come in. So he just thinks that this is just an all-American get-together. And how this episode results, Butthead just delivers the best line, in which he responds to Beavis's comments about what ended up happening to them at this ending, which, this is what it's like to be American, Beavis. And he just says it so proudly. I'm like, yeah, that's the butt of the joke, isn't it? So, at the end of this episode, I did have a lot of fun with it. It didn't go to the furthest strengths I think it could have, but for what it was, and for an episode that I wasn't exactly anticipating, but again, I accepted what the plot was, it went down a route that was not only better than what I was expecting, but really could have more or less been the most well-written as far as pacing and story goes in this episode that I think it could have. And I am feeling an overall positive review for this episode.
I want to give it a 7.6. I thought it was pretty good too. It was not as good as the one I gave a 10 earlier this season, but I couldn't stop laughing when...
Yeah, I feel like these aren't the best episodes of the season, but they are in the top, where as far as like us now being episode 9 into the 12 episodes, if someone asked me how this is going so far, I'd be like, yeah, the latter half of the season is definitely the better half. Also, this cutaway, let's just talk about this cutaway, because this specific cutaway, it kind of reminded me of, I can't remember which episode or episodes they were. That'd be fucking weird if I remembered which ones they were. But you know how in the past we've gotten those instances where Beavis will be commenting on something, and for whatever reason, just for the sake of it being completely out there and just not expecting, Beavis will just spit very bizarre facts where it's to the point where it's like, Beavis, how the fuck do you know this shit? Where they're actually watching an ad for a sedan in which Beavis is just being Beavis, you know, talking about, you know, how do you know this car actually works, and basically just saying what any of us would be thinking out of a car ad, just obviously saying, yeah, sure, yeah, like that's accurate, in which Butthead is basically just selling this shit. He's just spitting these facts where it's, again, it's one of those things where you don't expect it, because it blindsides you so well, and it just comes in where you're really not expecting it, it just feels off. It just makes for such a memorable and hilarious segment, which I do want to say that I think both of these episodes' cutaways were probably some of the more memorable ones that will stick with me. So let's just get into episode 2 now, which is Breeding Frenzy. So this episode opens up with Beavis and Butthead at a dog park, and it goes exactly how we've seen it before. I mean, there's been plenty of episodes where Beavis and Butthead are fixated on just dogs shitting. It's that classic thing where it's like, oh yeah, we've seen this behavior out of these guys before. But with this being a modern day episode with this kind of situation, with it being at a dog park, with them just watching this lone dog just shit, this guy ends up coming up to them saying, is this your dog? And which they're like, no, we're just here watching it shit. And the guy's basically responds with, yeah, it's a shame. These kind of dogs, they're worth $5,000. People will pay $5,000 for this dog, which is breeded with whatever dog, and they don't even clean up after it. In which the only thing that Beavis and Butthead gather from that is, wait a minute, so if we get a dog to score, we're gonna be fucking rich.
So, I just want to say that, first off, they don't get a dog to breed with another dog. They get a raccoon, which I'm like...
Well, of course, it would be way too easy if they got another dog, Jacob. It'd be too easy.
But I'm just saying, if you're going to breed a raccoon with a dog, at least make sure it's a cute dog you're breeding the raccoon with, so at least the dog is worth buying.
And I'm just gonna say, what the fuck is with these guys and fucking raccoons this revival? So, in this instance, with a raccoon, they're basically walking around the neighborhood trying to find a dog. And what ends up happening? They find a raccoon scouring through the trash. And what ends up happening? Well, I'm not going to spoil it right away. I'll spoil it in a second. But I'm just going to let you guys have some time to think about what could possibly happen. They find a raccoon going through trash. What do you think ends up happening? Exactly what you'd expect. Beavis is the fucking guinea pig, or Butthead tells him to go get the raccoon, in which he does, and it just mauls his fucking ass. It goes exactly down the routes that you would expect out of being a Beavis and Butthead fan, knowing that Beavis gets the shitty end of the stick. Well, it goes even further, where Butthead actually traps Beavis in the trash can, and with Butthead being classic Butthead while Beavis is getting his classic treatment, replies, "Make sure you don't hurt its schlong, Beavis. We need that. You have to earn its trust." So he's literally pinning down this trash can while Beavis is getting fucking mauled on the inside. So what ends up happening from here is that a couple scenes later, we now see them walking down the sidewalk with this raccoon trapped in a fucking laundry basket. And I'm just gonna say, I am always a sucker when it comes to new Beavis and Butthead wardrobe. Now, I don't know if I'd necessarily call this a costume, but it's definitely different, where we just see Beavis holding this fucking raccoon in a goddamn laundry basket, just walking down the sidewalk, just full of fucking scratches. And it was one of those things where I'm like, look, as a sucker for Beavis and Butthead wardrobes, that needs to be a Funko Pop. So these guys are basically walking down to the dog park. They approach the dog park now, and it was that, again, like this always happens, it was that sense of anxiety and morbid humor where I'm just like, okay, these guys are now at a dog park with a feral raccoon that we just see what happened to Beavis. It was something I didn't want to see, but because of how I've learned that Beavis and Butthead episodes, especially this revival, always end up going out, no pun intended, this episode does go out with a bang.
Freaking, I just want to mention that, there's an irresponsible dog owner in the end of this episode. Just pointing that out there, if you know anything about dogs and all that.
Yeah, that actually reminds me of something I want to make a note of. It's one of those things where when it first happened, I didn't think anything of it, but now that I saw what ends up transpiring in this episode, which I actually do not want to spoil, because you could think a million things. It's one of those things that when you get to it, all you want to think about is, what the hell is going to happen? Do I finish this episode? So I'm actually not going to spoil this, but it's one of those things where the guy at the beginning, this scene, when it happened, I was like, so that's why they introduced this character so early on. They couldn't just have this guy come in for nothing. They had to make this guy some sort of a fucking joke. And all I'm going to say is that how this episode does wrap up, it ends in the fashion where something does happen where the guys mistake it for scoring. And how it overall concludes, it wasn't anything that actually went to the furthest of its strengths, I think. Kind of like with the last episode. I feel like they could have gone a little bit further with it, especially in this episode, because it honestly does just kind of end. But it's in that sense where, even though it just kind of ends with no genuine conclusion, it felt right. Like, it kind of just ends abruptly and you're like, okay, that was the episode. I was fine with that. Also, talking about the cutaway now, like I said in the past one, this was probably one of the more memorable cutaways, in which this cutaway, they're basically commenting on this internet personality. I don't know if this is genuine, or I don't know if it's for like a bit, but it's one of those things that all the criticisms and thoughts that I had watching this cutaway, Beavis just ended up speaking my thoughts. And it was just that thing where this girl's getting roasted throughout this whole cutaway, and everything that the boys are saying, I'm just like, dude, yeah, I'll drink to that. It just felt like we were on the same level. And I can't remember which episode it was, but there was another episode in this revival where it was this same exact thing. And I always respect that, because it's almost like they're self-aware and they know what the audience want, and they know what the general idea of people would kind of react to the specific thing that they're commenting on. And it was just one of those things that it just felt great for what it was. I enjoyed the whole thing. The cutaway, it wasn't anything that I really had to complain about. It just felt proper for what it was. And that's kind of how I feel about these episodes as well. They don't go to the furthest of their strengths, but they know what they are, they know what people want, and they deliver enough with those aspects. So with this episode as well, I'm also going to give it a positive review.
I'm going to give this one a 6.9.
Yeah, definitely see what you're saying. Like, they're good, and they're some of the better ones, but they're still not the best. I do think that, again, what I said earlier, I do stand by it, that the latter half of this season, we still got 3 more episodes left. I might have to go back through that trailer and be like, okay, there's 3 episodes left. Which of these scenes have we not seen yet in the show? One coming off right off the bat is the acupuncture scene. We haven't seen that yet. So I'm really curious about how this episode is going to play out from here on out, because this later half of the season is absolutely crushing it. But yes, guys, that is going to do it for our review of episode 9. Sean, Alex, Luis, 8-Bit Massacre, thank you guys all for always keeping up with us, as well as everyone else. Thank you guys always for commenting. Some of my favorite videos to do for you guys are these Beavis and Butthead episodes, because it's just so great to see that in 2023 this still has the fan base that it has, and we're obviously all on the same level. Just the Beavis and Butthead fan base has always been something that just means so much to me. So yes, guys, that is going to do it for our episode 9 review. Let us know what you guys thought about the episodes down below, as well as our reactions, our reviews. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you're having a great day. We'll see you in the next one.